From the first post, Pakistan's Khawaja Asif declares open war with Afghanistan after deadly border clashes. It's worth noting Pakistan has nuclear weapons, but there aren't a lot of cities in Afghanistan that are worth using a nuclear weapon on. Pakistani Defense Minister Khawaja Asif has declared an open war with Afghanistan after the Taliban administration said that its forces killed and captured several Pakistani soldiers during a cross-border offensive. Our patience has reached its limits. Now it is open war between us and you, Khawaja said, posted on X. Taliban's spokesperson. What was that?
That's a great forum.
Right?
To declare war.
Taliban spokesperson Zabullah Mujahid, I think, said in posts on X that multiple Pakistani troops were killed and others taken prisoner. He added that a large-scale operation has been launched against Pakistani military positions along the Durand Line in response to what he called repeated provocations. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Interior Minister Mosif Navik said that Islamabad's retaliation to the Taliban attacks was a befitting response, and blasts and gunfire rang out in the cities of Kabul and Kandahar under Operation Ghazib-ul-Haq. So you think that the Pacs are going to nuke the Afghans? Or do you think they'll waste a nuclear weapon on them?
Is that
an atomic weapon? Well, I mean,
you would know better about this. You like talking about the Middle East.
I don't know about that, but like I said earlier, I don't think that there's a city in Afghanistan worth using a nuclear weapon on. The Pacs have to worry about India. India's got nuclear weapons. The Pacs have nuclear weapons. They're pointed at each other. They hate each other. I don't think that they'll waste them on the Afghans. I'm surprised. Well, actually, no, now that I think about it, not really. I imagine the Afghans wouldn't have done this prior to the U.S. pullout, not because the U.S. is there, but because they didn't have the hardware. After the U.S. left all those weapons, the U.S. is tacitly responsible for this conflict, I imagine, because I bet they're all running around with M16s and PVS 14s, on their helmets at night, looking, shooting at the Afghan or at the Pacs because they've got all this U.S. hardware.
With all the weapons,
figure out at least.
Like all the weapons in Mexico.
Well, I mean, I imagine some made it there. Mm-hmm. Well, Fast and Furious, yeah, but the guys in Pakistan have military stuff. They're not, they don't have civilian. American civilian stuff, so they all got machine guns now. So I'm sure they've got lasers and scopes and all the stuff. You see all the propaganda videos that the Afghanistan or the Afghans have released after the U.S. pulled out. They're all wearing uniforms. They're all kitted up, not saying that they know how to use any of this stuff properly, but I think a couple of guys got into a Black Hawk and crashed it.
They did. I saw that. Yes. That's happened twice now.
Oh, really?
Blackhawks.
You'd think that they would be like, let's find a place where we can send guys to learn how to fly this thing before we let them get in it.
Oh, you got YouTube. You couldn't just look it up on YouTube?
No kidding.
I've been in a helicopter and they're not easy to fly. They're not easy. I got to sit in the...
You get the flight sims. You
I got
the flight sims.
I mean, I guess, but do you think they don't have internet like that in Afghanistan?
I know.
They're running like Nintendos. They're not Nintendos from '93. They're not running modern flight sims.
Yeah, they got to get Sierra Sim UH-60L Blackhawk, top tier flight simulator add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator X. I mean, legit, that's what they should be doing if they want to learn how to fly this thing.
Yeah. Why are they not?
I don't know. Sorry, guys, if I told the Taliban something you were trying to hide from them.
I think they know about video games.
I'm just picturing them like on their phone watching a YouTube video about how to fly a Blackhawk.
Get yourself a PX-52 or those flight sticks. I was just about to bust mine out for Elite Dangerous, this game I got.
The foot control.
So far, we've inspired the Taliban tonight and all of Elon Musk's women.
The U.S. wants, well, what I heard was the military wants, what was it, that base? Bagram Air Force Base that they had basically surrendered. They want it back. At least Trump had mentioned a year ago he wanted it back.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the U.S. wanted it, they would just go take it.
Yeah, you would think so. It's very strange that the Taliban's going aggro right now.
It'd be a great media play, seriously. Because Biden was the one that pulled out, and everybody shames him for all that. Imagine if Trump took it back.
He's like, you surrendered it.
No, like he would go there. That's what I'm saying. He would go there.
He would go himself
and stand on a tank. That's the image. Seriously, I mean,
we took it back. Biden gave it up. We took it back. Can't let him have it. It's too valuable. Too valuable. I just don't see. I don't see that there's. I don't think there's a lot of value in it for the U.S. anymore right now. They're focused on Iran. And whereas yes, you could, if we had Bagram, you could launch strikes from there. But I think the atoll in the Indian Ocean is serving the purposes pretty well, and you got 2 carrier groups in the Middle East now. So,
my question on this open war thing is, what does open war actually mean?
I mean, I guess
Is it like a Gaza scenario? Is that what they're looking at, to where it's like we're just going to eliminate the Taliban now?
I don't know that the Pakistanis can. I mean, I know that they have an air force that functions. There was a big old dogfight between the Paks and the Indians maybe a year and a half ago, and people got to see, I forget what kind of plane it was, but it was the first actual engagement, and the Paks beat the snot out of the Indians, if I understand correctly. But I don't know that they have the ability to really, wipe out the Afghans the way that the U.S. did. I know the Afghans don't have any significant. They don't have significant anti-air. They don't have a lot of SAM sites or anything like that. It's not like they got them posted up in the mountains where they can shoot them down. But I imagine they still have the Stingers that the CIA gave them 30 years ago, and those who worked against helicopters. And just ask the Russians, So, I mean, I don't know the extent of what open war is, but like I said, I mean, if Pakistan wanted to, they do have nuclear weapons. They have atomic bombs. I don't know that they have thermonuclear weapons, but they have atomic bombs.
They've got missiles too.
Yeah,
nuclear warheads and the missiles. Yeah.
So,
what percentage of the weapons used against us and against allies of ours has just been left by the CIA or given to these people by the CIA?
When it comes to Afghanistan,
just in general, like how much of the weapons supply that's used against U.S. and U.S. forces is something that's like left over from a time when they might have been an ally?
Oh, I mean, there's
like
a
the
lot.
Mujahideen.
So, Afghanistan, the combat that was going on in Syria, the Iraqis had a lot of funding from the U.S. because the U.S. was funding Iraq when they were fighting Iran. So, I mean, a lot. I don't know about Vietnam. I think the North Vietnamese were getting funded by China, so they were getting Chinese AKs and stuff.
Russia and Soviet, yeah.
But
Soviet bloc, China,
yeah.
Russia.
So I mean, a lot of it though, the Afghanistan, they've got a lot of the fighting in Afghanistan. Like once the U.S. kind of took it. Like it was a lot of, just some dude on a hill with an old bolt action shot a couple rounds at a forward operating base. And then the U.S. put up a bunch of helicopters and blew up the top of the mountain, but the dude was already gone. He's like, I take a couple shots and run. So I don't know exactly how much, but I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a whole lot. So I don't know. I don't think that this is going to turn into a broader conflict. I don't know how much, what does Pakistan actually get from wiping out a bunch of Taliban?
18 people? Is that what it was?
I mean, let's see. They were
18.
Yeah. The Taliban government in Afghanistan said the attacks were in response to Pakistan strikes earlier this week, which reportedly killed 18 people, as Islamabad said it targeted alleged militant camps and hideouts. Aren't they all militants?
Yeah.
It took
kind of, yeah.
The Taliban took 19 outposts on the border and then killed 55 Pakistani soldiers, according to this article from India.com.
Well, I mean,
What is the American interest in this?
we don't.
You have a border
Is it
state.
base?
It's the border state of Iran, putting geopolitical
but
pressure.
they're on
That's
the
what
other-
Afghanistan was all about, basically.
But Pakistan and Afghanistan are the other border. So
Yeah, they're on the east. Pakistan's
Pakistan-
the eastern side of
Yeah, so it's
Afghanistan.
pretty far away from Iran.
Yeah, but it's securing Afghanistan. Is that what your question was?
I mean, like, what is the U.S. interest in this at all? Like, what is like you were saying that it borders Iran, but what is our interest right now to get involved or to stay out?
I don't think to stay out. I mean, like I said, if the U.S. were to take a side, which I mean, the U.S. is friendly-ish with the Paks, and so they're not so friendly with the Taliban. So the U.S. ostensibly could decide they're gonna say, okay, we're gonna help the Pakistanis, but I mean, Pakistanis don't really need our help to kill Afghans, and if the U.S. were to side with the Afghanis, you're talking about a country that has nuclear weapons. They might possibly decide, all right, the Americans are coming, we're gonna blow up a nuke or nuke the Americans. Which not that I think that's gonna happen, right? I think that's incredibly unlikely, but. Anytime there's a country that's involved in any kind of conflict, if they have nuclear weapons, that is part of the equation. That's something you have to actually think about. That's something that was talked about with Ukraine a lot. How much will the U.S. and get involved in helping Ukraine, because if an American is killed by a Russian, then you can easily imagine a situation escalating out of control. And Russia and U.S. have the biggest nuclear arsenals on Earth. You were going to say something?
Oh, that I think the long-term militaristic goal would be to subdue and eradicate the Iranian theocratic regime, and then install like a liberal economic Middle Eastern authority there, like the king basically of Iran, what's his name, Reza Pahlavi, put him back in, the third, and then allow Israel to basically govern the Middle East. So one guy, Scott Horton and Martyr Maid, they do a show which is really great, and they were saying Daryl Cooper's Martyr Maid. He said that instead of going to World War III, he thinks there's going to be like a quadrupolar setup where the Chinese govern, Northeast Asia, the Russians govern Middle Asia, then the liberal economic order governs the West, and then Israel governs the Middle East, and then those four powers will kind of establish homogeny in some form, which is like the least worst outcome. I can't stand theocracy. Trying to govern with religion is insane. It is not agile enough to function as a government. It comes out of a 2,000 year or thousands of years text. Anyway,
depending on which religion you're talking about.
What's that?
Depending on which religion you're talking about.
If you had a legit religion, the American government's kind of like a religion. I have faith in that Constitution.
It works pretty well for the Saudis.
I don't know what's their.
Saudis.
They're a monarchy. They're not a theocracy, though.
Well, they're definitely. That's where Mecca is.
Wait a second, aren't they literally a theocracy though? Because like
Saudi Arabia, I could be wrong.
Like Islam and
Islamic law. Yeah. So they are a monarchy, but they are.
If they weren't selling us oil, they'd be prime enemy number one. If they weren't on board with the economic order right now.
And they've also done a lot to reintroduce American interests there by trying to get people to come out to Saudi Arabia more.
Yeah, the Saudis are they have their government is definitely not something that I would want. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to live under the Saudi rule, but they're one of the least worst in the Middle East. The Emirates seems like it's all right for tourists. Most Americans can go to Saudi Arabia. You can go to Dubai.
Well, that's why they've they've put so much time and effort into kind of courting American celebrities. They've paid WWE billions of dollars to do shows over there, billions of dollars. Comedians, musicians, and most of them, they end up having to come back and answering questions from people who are like, what are you doing over there with the, you were kind of woke before. What's with the human rights abuses? And then they have to either sidestep the question or just say they don't care.
Learn to dance around the
dance around the question.
They got to learn that Donald Trump weave.
Yes.
It says here the political structure of Saudi Arabia, just kind of as a tangent, is an absolute monarchy, but also a theocracy. But I'm like, who derives legal? Who has authority there? Is it the king or is it the prophet? And it can't be the same guy unless your king is the prophet or is the imam or whatever.
The prophet would be Muhammad,
right? And who represents that? It would be the imam, of state. The head of state was an imam, but if the head of state's some secular king, that's that doesn't really seem theocratic.
He's not secular. He's
technically
he's a Muslim.
But he would then bow to. I don't know. Maybe I don't know enough about the way Islam works in theocracy. But you would then bow to the religious authority, and the king would be number two to the.
Not necessarily. The head of the church.
They have a hierarchy where they enforce the religious laws in the place. I'm pretty sure.
You talk about England, right? The King of England was always the defender of the faith. He was the head of the Church of England.
Still is.
Yeah, technically, yeah. So the king is the guy that's in charge of the church and the guy that's in charge of the state.
And the military.
Yeah. So yeah, you can be. But all right, I think that's probably about all we've got to talk about for Afghanistan.
Oh no, we're talking
Afghanistan and Pakistan.
We got to the robots and the
I want to talk about AI. I don't know about you guys.
We'll get to that, I promise. In similar news, the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks end without a deal as threat of war grows. From The Guardian, high-stakes talks between the U.S. and Iran over the future of Tehran's nuclear program ended on Thursday without a deal as the White House weighs a military option that would mark its largest intervention in the Middle East in decades. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi claimed good progress had been made at the talks, and Omani mediators predicted negotiations would reconvene at a technical level next week in Vienna. But there was no immediate evidence to support suggestions that the two sides had drawn closer on the fundamental issue of Iran's right to enrich uranium and the future of its highly enriched uranium stocks. Nonetheless, the Iranian and Omani mediators sought to cast the talks in a hopeful light, likely seeking to avert a U.S. threat to launch strikes from its fleet of aircraft and warships that have amassed in the region. Aragachi described the talks as one of our most intense and longest rounds of negotiations. He confirmed that further contacts would take place in less than a week. Do you guys think the U.S. is positioning all of those military assets as leverage, or do you think that the U.S. is going to strike regardless of what Iran says? Or do you think they just expect Iran to say no? J.D. Vance was making the argument that Iran is I think that he said that they're still after nuclear weapons. So he's making the argument. So
weapons of mass destruction again?
Weapons of mass destruction.
2.0?
Nuclear weapons.
Boogaloo?
If Vance is saying that, that indicates full-on war hawk regime change.
But Vance isn't a war hawk.
I know. That's why him being the guy saying that is like, wow, they have decided they are taking that government out.
Well, if I read a piece that said that both the U.S. and Israel are kind of pushing the other one to actually kick it off. The U.S. doesn't want to start it, right? They want to say, okay, well, they want Israel to initiate, and then they'll back up Israel. And Israel says, well, we want you to initiate, and we'll back you up. I don't think that Israel's much of a backup to the United States. I think the U.S. is perfectly capable of taking care of their own military affairs. So I don't know that it's really all that compelling to be like, oh, you're going to back us up. No, I don't.
Well,
I don't think you're going to back up anything.
Don't they rely on Israel more for intelligence than anything else?
Yeah, allegedly Mossad's everywhere, and they have people in Iran as well.
Yeah.
So maybe they do, but it still doesn't justify if Israel wants to strike Iran, like, go ahead.
I'm surprised that they haven't yet. Because if you look at the history of Israel, I mean, Israel is basically, well, the rest of the world didn't do anything, so you're welcome. When it came to Syria. Yeah. And I can't remember all the other strikes that they've had, but it's been more of a, Israel's always stepped up, at least from their perspective. I'm not saying this, but this is what they've said. It's like we wanted to play diplomacy, but Israel has always been, no, we're not going to wait for that. So it's like Israel's stance has always been, nobody else in the world can have nuclear weapons, period. And if we see anybody getting close, we're going to take the action. Yeah. And they've proven that, even with everything with Gaza that came into play, or Iran, they've been threatening that, with the dome that's over their heads, they've launched attacks back, and they're like, we're going to take action on Iran. They put this out there before. Netanyahu has said this, and you talk about religion backing a government, right? That's pretty much their stance, is saying that, you know what, this can destroy God's people. Which is pretty much the whole world, right? But especially Israel first. So we're going to do what we need to do, regardless of the UN's approval, regardless of the US's approval. We're going to do what we need to do to make sure that nobody else obtains nuclear weapons.
When the Nazis were gearing up for war, World War II, the British basically appeased him. Neville Chamberlain was the prime minister at the time, and went to Hitler and was like, "We're just going to give them a bit of the Sudetenland out east. We're just going to cede them some territory, and we will appease Hitler, and then there will be no conflict." And Winston Churchill's like he's like screaming from the rafters, "They're going to go to war. We need to attack these. They're going to war. Everyone listen." And everyone's like, "You crazy old man." And then. And they had a time, when the Germans invaded Poland, there was this time when they had no troops in the West, and if the British and the French had attacked them, this is like where the Israeli mindset, I think, comes from. They would have conquered Germany, because the Germans couldn't have taken a Western offensive. But because they did appeasement and waited and waited and waited, the Germans got stronger and stronger, and then sneak attacked. And I'm sure the Israeli government thinks, like, we cannot allow that to happen again.
Yeah, that's Iran. That's 100% Iran, and that was Syria too.
That's because normally I'm pretty much like, hey, bro, you can't just say, like, we need to kill them before they attack us, and that's your justification, because it's like, how far can you take that? The Romans conquered half the planet with that mentality. But at the same time, Neville Chamberlain appeased Hitler, and that's kicked off the war. Like, you cannot appease a belligerent dictator, because they'll just keep taking and taking until they have you. So,
what do you guys think of the argument that the Persians in Iran want to see the Ayatollahs taken out, and that they will actually rise up? And if the U.S. and Israel decide that they're going to go and do strikes, that the people will rise up and handle the ground war? because that's one of the arguments that I hear. And the U.S. hasn't positioned, for a ground war. Like if you remember the first Iraq War, there was movement of troops, and everyone knew. Like everybody knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing with the Iraq War in the aughts. Like they were moving massive amounts of troops. They were moving ground forces. It was obvious that a war was coming, right? That is not what's going on now. They're moving air assets. They moved all kinds of tankers. They've got all kinds of planes. There is not a significant buildup of ground forces. So at this point, it doesn't look like there's going to be a U.S. invasion. It'll be a bunch of airstrikes and just dropping bombs. Do you guys think that the Iranians are gonna rise up and take the country for the Shah?
Not if they're getting bombed. Not if they're getting bombed. I mean, even
Not the resources either.
if we were in a revolution in our country against an evil dictatorship, and then the Canadians came and just started bombing our cities, that's not helping us. I mean, maybe you could argue things are so bad that the only way to break this system is to destroy it and start it over again. But Iran's not that.
Canada might do that because they lost at hockey, so it's completely plausible that could happen.
Twice.
We've been planning this
So
for
pissed.
The only-
2026.
The only bombing that Canada's going to do is they're going to send geese to poop on our cars.
Or
They don't-
like Strange Brew 2, which would bomb terribly in the theaters.
Yeah, right. They definitely don't have an air force capable.
Do you think that America's stance on war being so much more against these days, perhaps, than it has been in decades past? And we've had this discussion before that America doesn't like the idea, or there's a growing sentiment that they don't want U.S. in Israel to be as connected as they are. They feel like they're misappropriating resources, and there's a whole discussion that can be had about how much actual aid goes to that country. That's not the point. The point is it feels like Israel has interests in the Middle East, and America is kind of pulled along for the ride in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So for something like that, is the public disinterest in getting involved in these things in the year 2026 something that plays a role in keeping us from putting boots on the ground?
I think that it plays a role in keeping us from putting boots on the ground. I don't think the U.S. the American people don't want to see Americans on the ground in Afghanistan.
It's like Trump has never been afraid
Iran.
to use drones.
No.
Like it's never been a problem for him to do that. So when people talk about being a president who's against war, I was like, it's not necessarily maybe against ground war, against starting new war, but he's never been afraid to get involved in foreign countries.
Yeah, neither is the United States. Largely, if the U.S. goes and bombs a country and we don't lose any planes and no Americans come home in caskets, the American people are like, okay. Look at Venezuela, right? Like that was a significant operation, and it was carried out to the plan. No Americans died. We had one guy that took a bunch of rounds, and we had him at the State of the Union, gave him the Medal of Honor. Everybody cheered. Everybody loved it. He came, he might lose his leg, but, he came back and he's going to make it. And the American people have an overwhelming approval of that. It's like something like 75% of Americans are like, yeah, that was cool, man. Did you hear what the discombobulator, man? They made him guy shit his pants, man.
Can't talk about that.
But that's kind of the way that the American population is. It's like, look, if we don't have guys on the ground and we don't have Americans coming home in caskets and we don't lose any planes, bomb whatever you want. We'll actually cheer it on because Americans didn't die, and that's generally the sentiment.
But that's going to change over time, right? Like it generally Gen Z going into Gen Alpha isn't going to look on that type of conflict the same way we did, because they didn't grow up in a time period where you were kind of walled off from the rest of the world. They've grown up connected to the internet, which means that they've had access to information coming from these countries for a long time. And they live in a more globalist world than we did when we were younger.
I don't know that I think it's going to change. Because
you don't think the public sentiment in America will change?
When it comes to if the United States decides to do airstrikes, I really think the majority of Americans will be like, it's not a big deal. Excuse me. I think they'll be like, because it all depends on the level of U.S. casualties. And I think that just so long as Americans don't die, most Americans are kind of like, well, I got to go to work. Honestly, like it's
The last time that really mattered, I think, would have been Vietnam, just because so many died.
Yeah.
50,000 people or something over there.
Yeah.
54,000 people. More people died. As many as people died at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Whoa.
One battle in the Civil War more people died than the Vietnam War.
Oh my God.
Was that like with amputation, people dying after the fact too?
I don't know exactly how it was.
You know, it's the plot, Brett, what we were talking about is kind of the plot of 1984, the George Orwell book, is that there's forever wars overseas and people are just lulled into not caring because they just see like, okay, bomb went off, bad guy died, now we have new enemy, and it's over the years, all of a sudden now Oceania's fighting Atlantia or whatever, now all of a sudden you have a new enemy, and this whole time they'd be like, no, you've been fighting that other guy this whole time. But because of the internet, we're not in 1984. Nope. You can see from the ground in Iran the bomb falling on the guy, and you see his face, and like my mother, you see his mom bleeding out on the ground, and like now we just got to be aware of deep fakes.
Yeah,
because it's a lot about sentiment, like social sentiment.
There's also the issue where like living in America isn't as easy as it used to be financially. Yeah. So when you're struggling, if everything's going well and the country's in an economic boom and America's allocating a bunch of resources overseas and we're spending money to drop bombs on kids, maybe people are more forgiving. But when they can't afford to buy a house and grocery prices haven't come down to the extent that they want them to, and gas for your car isn't as cheap as you'd like it to be, then they're going to go looking for a reason as to why aren't things going good here. And maybe it's not the answer, Phil. We've had this discussion before, like the amount we actually spend on defense isn't actually, it's not the same amount as, but the point is they don't know that. That's assuming that they're as educated as you might be on where America's spending goes to, right? They don't necessarily know that most of it goes to Social Security and to all of that stuff. The point is they're looking for something to blame, and it's easier to blame what they would consider a real evil of dropping bombs overseas as opposed to paychecks for grandma who's still getting her Social Security.
That's all a cycle, though, too.
Yeah.
If you look back, I mean, you could go into the Great Depression. I mean, I've always loved history. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything new. I mean, even back to the Civil War that you mentioned, too. I mean, typically speaking, Democrats have always been spend. Right?
Yeah.
Keep driving that up. But you look back at coming out of the Great Depression, what happened, right? It was World War II. And what took place during that was a big spending program to build up our military, where everybody was put to work again, and it sparked a huge economic boom. Yeah, and then you saw after that the debt actually was even paid down because our GDP was pushed up so much because we started selling weapons to the rest of the world too. And it's cyclical. So I mean, if the economy goes down, history would show that there's going to be some big spending after this too.
The only thing, you mentioned a really good point, the cost of gas. If the U.S. starts striking Iran, I expect the cost of gas to go up significantly.
It has come down a decent amount.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to make the point that it hasn't come down. I'm just saying that there are still a lot of economic factors that young people are going to look at and wonder why this is going on.
And gas is the one that Americans do not want to see the cost of gas go up because most people have a sense that it affects the price of everything. But when you go to the gas station and you can fill your tank for $75 or $50, and then 2 days later it's $75 for the $50 tank and $100 for the $75 tank, people notice and they get mad. So whereas I understand your point about an economic boom and stuff, the immediate effects of a strike on Iran are going to be gas prices are going to go up, and that's going to be really, really bad for the administration. It's going to be really bad for the Republicans in the midterms because they're going to blame them.
Regarding the economic boom that you've noticed cyclically, is that like war? Is that what are you?
Absolutely.
That's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head.
War means profit. So it always has.
These society, is it just because I'm doing like math about calculating the cycles of history and great societies that grow and they expand and they expand. The only way to sustain it is to conquer and to take resources from outside and to grow. And we've sort of kind of tried to mediate that, but even the U.S. has been expanding over time. The Louisiana Purchase, now we have territories overseas and this and that, the liberal economic order expansion and resources and all of that, the East India Trading Company. But is there any other way? Like, can we sustain a thriving society without constant expansion?
We're going to talk about that when we get to AI.
You think AI might be able to help us do that? I think it might.
I don't know exactly. I don't think that we'll talk about it when we get to AI because I have thoughts. There is some disruptions coming, some significant disruptions. But yeah, I mean, I do think that war is like you said, war is profitable. There's a lot of Austrian economists that say no, it's not because that money could have been allocated to something else. But at the same time, when the U.S. spends money, it's not spending money; it's just creating the money.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a finite amount of money that could be spent somewhere else. That money is created and then given to the people that make weapons, and then you go and blow stuff up. So as much as I really do appreciate the Austrian school, and I appreciate libertarians' take on economics most of the time, the U.S. doesn't take, like, the U.S. doesn't tax to pay bills. The U.S. wants to do something, they just print the money and do it. So it's essentially it's a cost in inflation, and that affects every American. But it's not like you're saying, oh, well, we could have spent this money on something else, because.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about allocation rather than the flow of the cash.
Yeah.
The flow of the cash is what gets everybody excited, and that gets things moving.
The velocity of money.
Yeah.
So
the profitabilities of war too is like you can conquest and steal resources from the conquered, and you get a portion of your civilianry killed off in the war as these poor soldiers, so that you don't have to fund them. Like I would imagine the economists do the math of, like, what's the cost of a human? Is it a net positive or a net drain on society? Most humans probably are net drains on society. They produce more waste than they create income. So they're like, we can get a bunch of these people just reduced to zero. A bunch of this drain goes to zero with all this death that we're going to bring on our own people. And, like, I'm sure they do that math, and they think about how awesome it will be after the war when there's so many less of us to profit in everything that we've conquered. And all those other poor dead people, like, well, they were the poor ones anyway. So, and the children of the poor. So, like, who cares really?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I disagree with that, is because, like I said, Americans don't like to see Americans come home in body bags. If you had a significant decrease in the population, enough to make an effect on the economy or the amount of money, GDP or whatever, you would have a really, really, really pissed off population.
Vietnam proved that with the TV. Like, I know people whose dads had their legs blown off, like a girl, and you saw, like, guys get shot live in the jungle on TV. It was the first time that it humanized the conflict, and you're like, these are real people. This isn't just like, we're missing 20%. Like, if you don't see them, they never existed. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Because it really is about how people feel about the aftermath.
Yes.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.